Hi, I'm Scott Haas. Thanks for joining me on Chef's Table. Today I sit with Andrew Carmellini at the Dutch in New York City. Andrew Carmellini worked for many years under Daniel Boulud, one of the world's greatest chefs and protectors of French food. Andrew learned how to cook exquisite classics from various regions of France. He was taught how to manage a restaurant. He ran Cafe Boulud. Independent now for less than 10 years, he decided to be himself. French food is delicious, but what about the importance to Andrew of growing up in an Italian-American household in South Cleveland? Shouldn't his upbringing find a place in his food? With Locanda Verde in New York's Tribeca, Andrew is cooking beautiful Italian-American food. At the Dutch, the food is American: pot pies, fruit pies, and barrio tripe. His talent is such a deep expression of his thinking about food that no matter what he does, the passion and skill are evident. Now, Andrew Carmellini sits down with me on Chef's Table. So, Andrew, first of all, I want to thank you for taking time to meet with me because I know you're busy with all the restaurants.
Not too busy for you.
Aren't you kind? So, listen, when I last saw you, you spoke about the need for a chef to develop a cooking voice, and I've been thinking a lot about that observation, sincerely. So I wanted to know, what is a chef's cooking voice in pragmatic terms?
It's kind of hard to define, really, because as a chef, you have if you're developing your own cooking voice, you're kind of like grabbing experiences along the way, chefs you work for, places that you ate, stuff that you grew up cooking with your family, travel. And taking all this and kind of combining it together to express yourself through your food. And doing that, I mean, obviously, you're going to grab inspiration from different things and different people along the way. And you can't, see, though some people do it, it's not very flattering just to blatantly copy someone.
Of course.
And so that's what, the same way like in art, you need to find your own way to express what you need, what you want to do. And that's that process of finding your cooking voice.
I'm wondering pragmatically, though. I mean, is it a voice in ingredients? Is it a voice in technique? Is it a voice in management?
Everything. It's all of those
all
things.
Those things.
It's all those things. The way that kind of like trend, that's where it ends up, is how you're presenting something on the plate, both in the flavor profile of something and the way it kind of looks on the plate, the visual aspect of that, and the sensory aspect of that, and how it relates to the restaurant or restaurants that you own.
Right.
That's all part of that, yes, that cooking voice. Those other things translate into what you're doing.
And one of the things that's so critical in any restaurant is consistency. So how do you sustain your cooking voice? In other words...
Well, that's the hard part. What I've said it before is that because I also am a musician and I love music, and it's easy when you're a musician to work on a song for a month and kind of perfect it the way you want to perfect it and go into a studio and record it either by yourself or bringing some studio musicians to get the result that you want, and then it's done. It's on an MP3, it's on a CD, you have it forever. That's the difficult part, is that the consistency of restaurants, making sure that if someone comes on Monday, if someone comes on Friday, they have the same experience, have the same dish. Whether they like it or not, that's another issue. But getting the team together that believes in your cooking voice, that's a whole other level.
And is it a chorus? I mean to say, is it a collaboration? You have a vision, let's say, of, I don't know, a roasted chicken, let's say, and this is how you want it done.
Sure.
And so you've got the sous chef, and not the cooks per se, but
right.
The sous chef who says, gee, I've got this idea, so then what happens?
I find that it's always best when you're trying to build that team and keep people kind of excited about what you're doing, to include them in on the process. And the big mistake you can do if you're a chef, restaurateur, probably a general good life lesson, is never stop learning. And I still continue to learn a lot, or different approaches from my chefs or my sous chefs. They come from different restaurants, they come from different backgrounds, and chef, what do you think about doing it this way, or let's cook it this way, and it could be that's disgusting, there's no way we're going to do that, or that's awesome, forget about this other way we're going to do it. So kind of that becomes my call to kind of bring that collaboration, into play to get to where we want to be.
I think that's very interesting because there's some chefs who are not particularly interested in collaboration, who say this is how we're doing it and that's it. So you're saying
I've worked with a couple of those.
Have you? So you're saying that you want ideally teams that you can learn from one another. It makes your job easier in some respects because you have more than the one restaurant. And I'm wondering, do you have two voices? I mean, you have two very different restaurants. You've got, is it fair to say, an Italian-American restaurant, and you've got an American restaurant? I mean, how would you
I would say Locanda's an Italian restaurant that has some Italian-American influences in it.
Okay. But these are two very different restaurants.
Very different.
So so you have two cooking voices?
At least I have three, because I'm about to open up a French restaurant also, because I'm an American guy, and I worked in Italy for a long time, and worked in high-end Italian restaurants, and I lived and worked in France, and worked in high-end French restaurants, and I guess my cooking is a combination of all those three things, but I never wanted to mix them.
Right.
So I always wanted an Italian restaurant and an American restaurant and a French restaurant.
Because that's based on your experience?
Based on my life experience and what I think I'm good at. And so yeah, there are three voices there. It's a little bit hard to have three voices in your head, though. I've come to, in the last year, this is starting to be a little bit of a problem for me.
Why?
Just to try to keep them, even the way we do that. I have the menu. So if I have a pasta with shellfish here, I don't want a pasta with shellfish over there, and we try to not have certain things on the menu at one place that we might not have at the other place, and there's just flavor profiles that I should be using here, I should not use at the Italian restaurant. Even though Italian-American food is such a part of American culture.
Right.
So we do a couple Italian dishes here, so it gets, and no one probably notices that but me. It's a way of kind of compartmentalizing my restaurant.
So I understand what you're saying about wanting to separate the dishes. At the Dutch, though, you do have a smoked ricotta ravioli dish.
Is this a test?
No, it's not a test. I'm just curious. But you know what's funny about that dish? You have a thing on there that says smoked ricotta, tomato, and soft herbs. So for the life of me, what are soft herbs as opposed to hard herbs? I mean, it's a delicious dish, but what are hard herbs? What are soft herbs?
It's actually an internal joke.
Oh, good. Tell me the joke. What's the joke?
No, it has to do with some gentlemen that worked with us previously that have another restaurant, and it was kind of slightly making fun of them and the way they tweak their menus.
I see.
And the way they, we do that sometimes. No one really knows this. It's just kind of.
I understand. It's a Richie Teresi joke.
It's a Richie Teresi joke. Yeah.
You mentioned opening this new restaurant. And I remember a few years before the Dutch opened, you and I had spoken about the clean American cooking that you wanted to have there. So this new French place that you're opening, tell me what your thoughts are about that. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm still thinking about it as we speak, but France is. I actually kind of forgot because it's been a couple years since I really traveled in France or immersed myself in France, and I've spent probably about a month and a half so far this year there, and probably going to spend some more time. It's such an awesome country, and especially the countryside and country cooking there is just so delicious, and the products are so delicious, and it's so varied too. There's Italian influence, there's Spanish influence, and there's all the French classics. So I'm finding a way to kind of integrate all that into French cooking in New York, and what does that mean? It's a little bit out of fashion, a little bit, to say that you can open up a French restaurant, which is kind of the reason I want to do it, and kind of explore that. So
You're mulling.
We're figuring it out. Yeah, we're figuring it out.
So you don't know, is it going to be formal, informal?
No, it's going to be similar to Locanda Verde and the Dutch in the sense that it's a place you can go out to eat at, meaning that you feel like you're having a night out, but it's also a neighborhood restaurant, and it was really important for me when I kind of left fine dining in my head for a while, and wanted to do restaurants that were more about me and how I live and my life in New York, and socially just also how I was feeling. is I wanted a place you could stop by for a bite to eat, and that's what Locanda is, and that's what the Dutch is. And you can make a reservation, make a night out of it. It's a night out, but if you're in the neighborhood and it's Tuesday and you just want to like head to the bar and have some oysters and have a beer and maybe a steak or a slice of pie, you can do that. The same thing like Locanda, you can come up to the bar, have a bowl of pasta, have a glass of rosé, and split. I wanted both those things, and I think that the French place is going to be a little bit the same kind of spirit.
This is the last thing I'm going to ask you about the French place, but I know you're still thinking about it. But it sounds like you're describing a neighborhood bistro. But it's not. I can tell you don't want to do that. So is it?
Well, it's a neighborhood bistro. The space is a little bit large to say it's going to be a neighborhood bistro, which is you'll see when we open how I'm going to kind of deal with that a little bit. But kind of want to have a sense that bistro cooking, and what that means. There's going to be a lot of that spirit of French cooking going on. Yeah.
So for years and years, you worked with Daniel Boulud, and you ran Cafe Boulud, and you cooked beautiful French food. Are there still influences in your food and organization of teams and techniques from those years?
Yes. I mean, still to the day, I run the American place and the Italian place. I mean, that way of running a kitchen is the way I know and the way that I think I'm really good at. Techniques, again, I always say that good cooking transcends culture. So it doesn't matter if you're making ravioli, you're making pierogies, you're making dumplings. It's kind of the same technique overall. It's just your cultural expression of that changes. So the way we organize the kitchen is it's rigid in how you get the job done, and there's training involved, and so very much so. The Cafe Boulud days, my time at Arpège in France and working in France it's the basis for that.
So what did you need to unlearn from all those years of working within the Boulud organization? I mean, in other words, in terms of your own cooking voice, you had to unlearn the voice that you've been following.
Right. I mean, before that, I also was in very high-end restaurants. Before that, so to be honest with you, I haven't unlearned anything. I should say, because we're cooking the same way we're cooked at when we had Michelin stars and 4 New York Times stars. We've just stripped down the experience a little bit, and instead of taking a dish like ossobuco, okay, and saying, okay, that's ossobuco. I love those flavors, veal, orange, rosemary, black pepper, meaty sauce, bone marrow, and decompartmentalize them in a way, and you make a bone marrow flan, and you do a little braised veal cheek, and you take the citrus and make a gastrique out of it, and you do citrus breadcrumbs, and then you do fried rosemary this, and then maybe you present something in a... Well, instead of doing all that, we just concentrate on making a real delicious ossobuco. Kind of the old... I really love to read old cookbooks and get techniques from old cookbooks that maybe have been forgotten to kind of get flavor. So for example, in that idea of ossobuco is that if you were working kind of in a French vein, a little bit more evolved, you would use a veal stock that then you have made into a veal jus, and then you'd braise that veal shank in that veal jus for 3 or 4 hours, and then you take that, and it would have vegetables in it, and tomatoes and herbs and different flavorings inside, and then you would strain that maybe 2 or 3 times to get a very pure kind of extraction of that sauce.
Sure.
What I'm doing these days is we take everything in the pot except for the meat, the vegetables, the herbs, the spices, the citrus zest, anything else put inside, and I put the whole thing through a food mill, and you get this. I want all of that in there. I want the overcooked vegetables. I want the herbs that have been cooking for hours, and that gets put in a food mill and then put back into the sauce. So you don't have this pure kind of expression of what that dish should be. You have this more kind of rustic presentation, but you have all this texture. You have all this other caramelization. You have all this I don't know.
It's
Just
gutsier. It's gutsier.
it's much more gutsier presentation, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying that this is how I feel.
No, I understand you're not saying one's better than the other. To me, it speaks to what you were saying about a cooking voice. That when you were working for, say, a luxury French restaurant, that technique or that approach wasn't possible, let's say. So now it's possible, and it reflects more of your feeling about how the dish should be done for your purposes.
It's not really a purpose. It's just more of my soul and how I
Right.
kind of like feel about it.
Okay.
And mind you, Daniel, he has a couple high-end restaurants, but he also has casual restaurants too. And it's difficult sometimes to have to think about both the same way it's difficult to think about an Italian restaurant and an American restaurant when you're a chef. If you're a restaurateur, it's probably a little bit different because emotionally you're not maybe involved in the dishes as much, if that makes sense.
One question I was curious about too was, I mean, you worked for a long time with Daniel and with Greg Kunz, and you were just saying now at L'Arpège. Do you miss luxury? I mean, do you miss using super duper high-end ingredients and those really, incredible techniques that are involved? You mentioned the veal dish. Mm-hmm. Do you miss any of that?
I do a little bit, and one day if I have the opportunity to do that again, I'm probably going to do that again. There's no plans right now for that, but I think one day I'm going to find kind of the right platform for that. And what I really want to do is I'd like to take a year to train me personally for it, and then that's kind of like what I'd love to do is obviously still running my restaurants, but also training myself besides working on the design and the real estate and the finances and all those other things. Just I have this kind of like marathon in my mind that I would write down, marathon training that I would go through to do that again.
Yeah, but I don't understand because you've already done it. So what kind of new training would you need?
It's more about just kind of getting in the mood. The same way like I'm going to France and cooking in the countryside myself, which is what I just did. It's kind of the same thing. Just a lot of travel and just getting in the mood, because it's a different way of thinking. If you want to do the ultimate expression of cuisine in a very rarefied environment, it's a very, very different discipline than running a 200-seat Italian restaurant. It's completely different. Even you just have to think about everything differently. The employees have to be in a different focus, everything.
Right.
So it takes a little bit of time to get ready for that.
I understand. I understand now why you would want to go into training on that. Which kind of brings me to the question of everyone has the Dutch has been open, 2 years now?
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
So you had an idea, like you have this idea for the French restaurant, and the idea changes when people walk in the door. So is the Dutch, right, so is the Dutch...
I just had this conversation.
So what's the deal? So is the Dutch now the way you anticipated it being? What did you think what did you think the Dutch was going to be, and what is it now?
I think it's 95% of what I thought it would be. And it is true that you can work on restaurants, unless they're a franchise or a chain or that type of thing. It's very... so far in my experience, very emotional kind of experience, and there's this ideal that you try to reach, but it's a very human business also. You have employees, you have customers, and you kind of don't know 100% what it's going to feel like until you open the doors, until you get your groove. There's a million things that you tend to adjust along the way. You might find that usually it's the dish that I'm most excited about, or that I think is amazing and everyone is going to talk about, that people hate the most, and I take off the menu after like 5 days. I find I'm not really sure why that happens, but that's kind of like been par for the course a little bit. And the dish that I think is okay ends up that's okay, that's going to be pretty good, ends up being the most popular thing on the menu. So it is true that you don't really know 100%.
But how about the vibe? I mean, what is the vibe?
The vibe is exactly what I wanted. It's good energy here, and sometimes that can translate to being too noisy. But we've made you make adjustments. You're not, even though you hire people to tell you to put some insulation here, to do this thing with the chairs, whatever, to try to get the right noise level in the restaurant. No one likes a quiet restaurant. Nobody likes a quiet restaurant. And you want, especially in New York, if you're coming from somewhere else or you're even down the street, you want to feel like you're out or somewhere. And we all live we live in apartments. We have stressful lives. We're dealing with so many extra kind of levels of stress, and you want to kind of go out and just kind of like relax a little bit, and that's kind of the vibe I wanted to have here.
That's an interesting take on that, because now I'm thinking about the French place, because a lot of people old school, like my parents' generation, they wanted a quiet restaurant.
Right.
They wanted a temple of gastronomy where you
Sure.
went in and, the voila thing, So that's over, huh?
Well, I'm not saying it's over.
From your perspective, though.
No, I'm not saying that. And I think at the French place, I'm not 100% sure when to do that. It's not going to be, super old school that way.
Right.
But you want to have, a little bit of sense of that you're out. And I'm not saying it's over. And again, one day in the future, maybe I'll have that more kind of Zen-like experience, which I also love. Don't get me wrong. Last night I went to eat, Japanese food at a place that is just like going to Japan, and there's no soundtrack, and it was just very, very calming. It kind of depends on your mood.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's what an awesome city where you can have so many different experiences like that. I can have that Zen experience on Sunday, and then tonight I can go completely baller.
Right. So, but I mean to say, from the kind of restaurants that you are running now, I'm thinking of Locanda Verde, which I love going to. It's you really feel like you're at a party. It's not a very Zen-like environment.
It's not Zen-like. Yeah. That's on purpose. I really wanted to have kind of this Italian taverna, a little bit, some ruckusness going on. I don't know, just what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Hopefully people like it. They seem to.
They seem to, yes.
They keep on coming back.
They do come back. You have a well-known business partner with that Robert De Niro. Do you find that your business partner there or elsewhere, they turn to you and say, this is what we want you to do, or?
So far, people have trusted me and kind of like my vision of what I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
Bob's great. The one thing he said when we talked about taking over that restaurant that was there previously is that he remember growing up, and there was a place in the Upper West Side that always had people coming in and out of it. And he said, if I could just figure out how to do that, then he would be really, really happy. And I said, that's what I want to do. Like, it was kind of like, we saw the vision together.
Speaking of Locanda Verde, you said, you describe it, labels are labels. Does it really matter? You described it as an Italian restaurant, and I think of it as, say, I don't know, I think it was Italian-American, but does it matter? Does it matter what I think? It's just good food, right?
It's just food. I call it Italian taverna. It's kind of like, I do the Italian-American kind of influenced dishes in there just because Italian-American culture is very different from Italian culture.
Of course.
It's very, very, very different. And my family's from northern Italy, so it's not really the same as a lot of immigration to the States, which was southern Italian. But it's something that I think should be talked about and explored and also celebrated. So it's, we do some, traditional Italian food there, like you would see in Piemonte or Tuscany or Abruzzi or Sicily, and there's that distinct influence in those dishes. But I also have a dish that I call it's a Sunday night ragu, and it's one of the most popular things on the menu. People love it. Kind of that idea of Sunday sauce, and we make it with pork ribs and some oxtail in there and pork shoulder, and we cook it a long time, and it's really delicious and really satisfying. It should be, I don't know, I think in America you can say you're cooking very, very traditionally, but authenticity is overrated, I think.
Right.
And that's why I like to bring in that kind of Italian-American influence also.
So much of what you're saying about Locanda Verde is what I love about Italian and Italian-American cooking. There's the power of the simplicity, the power of the ingredients. And so why do you think, it's really been bugging me, why do you think Julia Child said notoriously that she didn't like Italian food because there's not enough cooking? I found that comment so like off the wall. I mean, do you have an opinion about that?
I went to, whatever, I'll talk about it. I went to Joe Robuchon about 2 years ago, and he was there at the counter. And he came up I had never met him before, and I've always been admirer of his cooking, over the years. The great chef, and he came up to us. We were just two customers at the bar. This is in New York, and he introduced himself, and I was like, "Oh, pleasure to meet you. I've had your work, for the last 20 years. I really appreciate it." And he's like, "Oh," and we started talking, and I said, "I'm a chef, and I just opened up an Italian restaurant downtown." And I goes, "Oh," he goes, "Do you have a card?" And I never have cards. I happen to have a card. It was one of my first meals out I'd had, because the openings they're intense experiences. So it was one of my first meals out, and after the opening, and I gave him a card, and he looked at it, and he said, "Ah, bon, la cuisine italienne," and he turned around and walked away. Wow. It's a little bit, there's a little bit that idea of, it's an antiquated idea, that's for sure. But there was generationally an idea that Italian cooking was a little bit more poor than French cooking, because there weren't as many steps or as many techniques, right. And it wasn't as pretty as French cooking. If you talk to my grandmother, the Italians taught the French how to cook. She loves that story. It was just, it's a generational thing, and I understand it, but I think it's pretty much not around, anymore. I mean, my family's from Friuli, so that region in Italy is been taken over by everybody, and it's been has so much influence from Austria and Yugoslavia, and everyone's been kind of through there and affected the cuisine. I mean, Sicily also has been occupied by everybody, and it's more Moorish than it is Italian. It's lots of North African influences, and it's all kind of there. So, again, authenticity overrated.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the last thing I wanted to ask you was, you told me once that you were accepted to Berklee College of Music, right?
Yeah.
So, are you still playing?
I don't play as much as I want to.
What did you play? What do you play?
I mean, I grew up a guitarist.
Uh-huh.
I grew up a guitarist that moved to New York and fell in love with hip hop. But I also, grew up with country and blues and all forms of rock. So I kind of all good music. I love good music, so it doesn't matter what it is. If it's good,
that's what Duke Ellington said,
and it's pure. I'm into it.
You know that Duke Ellington quote, right?
Yeah.
There's two kinds of music. There's good music and bad music.
Sure.
I think there's a connection between playing music and being a chef. Do you see one? I mean,
there's a lot of connection between the two. From a creative standpoint, and the way you think about music, I think is very, very similar to how you construct dishes, in the sense that if you're not just the bassist, if you're the band leader or the songwriter, you're thinking about starting with a beat, starting with a drum part, starting with some kind of rhythmic, and that's like sautéing the onions.
Layers of sound.
And it's like you're laying a sauce the same way, and you're laying upon that and rhythm and melody, same way of creating a dish. And also, if you're the band leader, the songwriter, the guy in charge, you're orchestrating to make sure that the bass player is on target and is trained and is ready to go, and the keyboardist knows his parts, and there has to be some improvisation. Well, not always, especially with modern concert experience, but it's the same thing. You have to build this team to put on this production.
So, which raises the question of what kind of band leader are you? The two best band leaders that existed ever were Stan Kenton and Duke Ellington, arguably, and what they did is they wrote solos for their players. So Duke Ellington wrote solos for Johnny Hodges. So do you write dishes based on the skills of your crew, or does your crew have to learn the tunes?
It's probably neither of those. It's in the beginning. Restaurants are different though, again, because they're just a different type.
I can only take a metaphor so far, right?
It's a different kind of performance, really. But I think I'm more kind of in the Frank Zappa line of running a band, which was he had some of the best players that existed on the face of the planet, but he gave them kind of room to do their thing, but he was still running the business and keeping everyone kind of in line. And I was musically, and both kind of the way he approached that was I think that's kind of more my.
I see. All right. So, Andrew, I just want to thank you very much again for taking your time. The French place is opening, what, in 2013?
2013, yeah, I hope so.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Cool, man. Nice seeing you.
Good seeing you. Moving forward, in 2013, Carmellini, drawing upon his experience of years and years of working with the world's greatest French chefs, is finally opening his much-anticipated French restaurant. On the next Chef's Table, I'll sit down with Chef Marc Vetri at Alla Spina. Chef Vetri has taken the food back home to its roots and added to it his remarkably personal experience of growing up Italian-American in one of the country's greatest cities. More on that next time.